The police have located several bodies found in the downtown area. The bodies belonging to several missing persons whom disappeared at random moments. Every one of them had no tie to one another, nor did they live in the same area. As to who killed them and how they got here is unknown. What is known is that the killer goes by the name White. As the person writes the word in blood near its victims. We've been talking about this murderer that goes by the name White. It came up about a week ago with his first murder of a 32-year-old man that had his abdomen slashed open and his intestines pulled out. Trust me, that's not the worst part of it. The man was found hanging outside his apartment window by his intestines, and they had been wrapped around his neck. Apparently, White used a knife to pin a part of the intestine to the floor of the apartment. "Hey, Tyler!" I heard from behind me as I was walking down the street. I turned around to see my friend Jeremy, whose blonde hair was almost blinding in the sunny weather. He ran up beside me as I replied with, "What's up?" Nothing much," he replied. "I just thought I'd go into town and find something to do." "Yeah, same here," I said. We continued down the street as Jeremy and I talked about White. It wasn't so much that we liked it, we were just intrigued by it, and its methods in which it used to kill. At times, we would swap ideas and thoughts as to what it could do next. It was a strange topic, but it was something that we enjoyed. Stanston, our fair city, has gone into alert. Police checking everyone that seems suspicious and putting out a bounty of over $100,000 on White's head. Sadly, all who tried to catch it were killed. Bodies turning up left and right. Some of them big-name bounty hunters like Jared the Hunter. Yeah, very clever. And a black-haired man who was very muscular and kept a sidearm with him at all times. The poor guy was found with his hands cut off and his gun jammed down his throat. He was found in his apartment that he'd rented by his wife, who also was found dead in a police station parking lot. No one saw how she got there or who did it, but everyone knew what happened. She had her eyes cut out, same with her tongue, and her neck sliced open vertically. White had no remorse, no regret, and had no limits. It didn't matter who. It killed whoever and for whatever reason. The police had been searching the city hundreds of times, over and over, but still found nothing. White was a prestigious killer, someone who knew what they were doing. It seems as if they'd studied methods in which to kill and not get caught. Parents feared for their children, but strangely, White never killed kids under any circumstance. Police did get a gender for White, male, around 18 years old, much like Jeremy and I. He was also noted to have dark brown short hair with dark brown eyes. All information was given to the police by a witness who claimed to have seen a young man in a white mask and a black trench coat, gloves and clothing matching his black boots, as he was walking away from, what would soon become a crime scene. After that, our school underwent an extreme security upgrade, and lockers were searched through constantly. This helped remove a lot of the potheads in the school, but it also made going to school more of a chore than it already was. I can't tell you how many times I've had to reorganize my locker because all the contents had been just dumped out onto the floor. The security went as far as to pull kids out of class to check what they had on their person. They never announced these disturbances, they just happened randomly. Security never spoke of what it was they were looking for, but I imagined it to be something like a white mask or black gloves. They couldn't find anything. I found it pretty ridiculous that they think the killer would bring his stuff to school, but I just kept it to myself, just in case that they started to blame me. With the fact that they couldn't find anything that brought them closer to White, the police became very nervous and frustrated, but they knew that they were dealing with a professional. Regardless, life had it fairly average, and most kids my age have tried to forget about White as we continued our daily lives, which is why Jeremy and I hang out as frequently as we do. As we made our way to the store, Jeremy received a call from his mother telling him that he needed to get back home. He didn't tell me why, but he left before I could ask. I decided to proceed into the store, and as I walked for anything that I could mess around with or buy to keep me entertained for some time, but sadly my time was wasted, and I soon left. On my way out of the building, I heard some whispers coming from behind me. Knowing it was only a group of adults speaking of the killer, I made my way out of the store. I heard this all the time. It comforts people knowing others feel the same as them. I shrugged off their conversation and continued to walk home. Walking past a group of guys around my age, all of them were talking about White, much like everyone else, sharing ideas as to what they would do if they caught the guy. They acknowledged one another and their ideas with laughter and acceptance. Some of their ideas were so demented that one would believe one of them to be White, but I knew that was impossible. One fact proved that. They had no follow-up. They had no idea what they'd do after they killed him. No way of getting rid of the body or anything. Ignoring them, I felt ease as I could see my home approaching. Feeling of solitude lifted weight from my shoulders. The cracked city sidewalk grew even shorter with every step, and the feeling of being back in my room filled me with relief. I arrived home and entered. The sound of my father mixing something up in the kitchen was the only thing audible throughout the house. Trying not to make myself noticed, I softly shut the door behind me and then crept up into my room. The white walls and ceiling relaxed my mind. I sat myself on my blue-covered bed as I stared up at the wall and sat before it. The whiteness of the walls reminded me of something that I placed in my closet the night before, so I stood up and made my way over to it as I opened the white door. I looked towards the floor where I believed to have left it, but there was nothing there except the dark blue carpet that covered the rest of the floor in my room. Where did I put it? I thought as I slowly closed the closet door back. A figure in the corner of my eye caught my attention as I turned to see that it was my father, standing in the middle of the bedroom doorway. His face was filled with disappointment and anger as I noticed he was holding an item in both hands. A sharp knife in his right, and my pure white mask in the other. A wicked smile stretched across my face as I slowly approached my father. What's with the stuff? I asked him, smiling. I don't know, Tyler, he said, growing impatient. I think you know. My smile then faded, and I realized that my facade was now apparent. Trying to keep my identity a secret, I playfully stated, Right, you got me, Dad. I'm white. Don't mess with me, Tyler, he barked as he tossed the mask on the ground in front of my feet. Anger was rising in him, and his eyes pierced me. I knew that no matter what I said, he wouldn't believe me, but I tried to play it off a little longer. Seriously? I asked. How could I be white? I found this knife next to that mask, he said, and a pile of bloodied clothes. So that I tried to say before my father interrupted. Tyler, please, he said, as if trying to reason with me. What? I asked. Just tell me the truth. I am. If you do, then we can get you help. Help? I don't need help, I replied, frustration rising in me. Either you tell me the truth, or I can call the cops. On your own son? He said nothing further. Instead, just stared with that same disappointed look. I sighed and sat on my bed and looked down towards the floor. I knew that there was no hiding my evil any longer. My father then turned and began to walk downstairs, so I quietly stood up and followed. I got close enough behind him that he finally noticed my presence but continued to walk. Dad, I'm sorry, I said, following him. It's okay, we'll figure it out, he said sympathetically. No, not about the whole white thing, I replied, chuckling. Then, why are you sorry? Sorry you had to find out. Then I grabbed my knife from his hand and embedded it right into his left shoulder. He let out a sharp cry as he fell to his knees on top of the staircase. I removed my blade from his shoulder, put my right foot on his back, and pushed him down the stairs, watching as he hit every step. See? You should have just called the cops, I said, walking around him, twirling my knife in my left hand. He didn't reply. The pain he was experiencing kept words from forming. I grabbed a handful of his hair and pulled him to his knees. Standing behind him, I placed my right hand over his forehead and jerked his head back, making sure that he looked towards me. He remained speechless as he wheezed in pain. I took my knife and placed the tip of it on his throat, right below his jaw, and with one easy plunge, I dug the blade into his esophagus. The sound of gurgling was all that my father could manage. I removed my blade and watched blood poured from his wound. I removed the blade and watched as blood poured from the wound in my father's neck and his mouth. Taking my right hand, I placed my index and middle finger into the fresh cut and dug within it. I hooked my fingers and pulled up, ripping open the wound further, finally killing the poor man. I removed my fingers and watched as his lifeless body fell to the floor, surrounded in a pool of crimson. Knowing my mother would be working late that day, I dragged his body out into the shed in the backyard and washed away the pool of blood and the red trail that stemmed from it. I was not satisfied that I had done it, but I knew that I had to, so that the police didn't find out that I was white. I went to my room and sat on my bed, almost emotionless. I stared at the wall, recounting the event that just passed, wishing that it could have been avoided. Night soon overcame the sky, as my mother finally arrived and came into my room, asking me where my father had gone. Not sure. I said, trying to remain innocent. Well, I tried calling him several times, and he never answered, she replied, glancing down at her phone. Weird, I said as she left my room and went into her own. Relieved that she didn't ask any further questions, I laid down in my bed and soon drifted off into slumber. When I awoke, it must have been in the midst of the night, as the moon was now high in the sky. Feeling nervous that my mother would find my father's body from some form of coincidence, I quietly walked outside and into the shed. The light the shed provides was barely enough to give it visibility, but it allowed me some form of illumination, so I could see that green tarp that I hid my father underneath. But when I removed it, I was shocked to see that the body was gone. Oh, my heart filled with dread as I threw the tarp into the air frantically, just trying to find the man's lifeless corpse, but it was gone. The door of the shed then opened and I froze in place. The voice of a middle-aged man from behind me said, "Freeze! Put your hands behind your head now." I did as he said, and he came up behind me and threw me onto the ground, my wrist soon feeling the cold sting of the handcuffs around him. The cop then picked me up and walked me outside, where I could see several police vehicles surrounding the house, their green and blue lights flashing through the sky. I woke to the darkness in my room, the sound of police sirens in the distance. I sat up in my bed, realizing that I had just dreamed all of that, what had happened. But to reassure myself, I went to the shed to check for my father's body. I was pleased to see that it was still there, and that no one had found it. So I left it where it was, and went back to my room. Feeling the urge to kill, I put on my black attire and white mask, and looked out the window. The night's still young. I have no time for rest, I thought as I walked closer to it. My attention then shot to my door, as I could hear my mother, who was still awake in her room. The fact that my father was still not home must have kept her up. I opened the bedroom door to see the golden glow of the bedroom light from under the door. What if she begins looking for Dad? I thought as I removed the mask. What if she finds the body and learns that I'm white? I looked at her door, wondering what I should do to keep my secret hidden. But only one thing made sense at the moment. I had to kill her as well. I left my room and went into the kitchen downstairs, taking a glass cup from one of the cabinets. And I raised the glass into the air and threw it against the ground, shattering it into shards, as a loud crash echoed through the house. I grabbed a handful of some of the broken glass, knowing that I would use it. My mother's bedroom door soon opened, and I could hear her make her way slowly down the stairs. I backed myself against the wall to the left of the kitchen door, awaiting her arrival. "Tyler?" she called as she slowly stepped through the door. "Tyler, are you in here?" I remained in silence as she walked over to the area where the shards of glass remained. "Tyler?" she called again. This time, I walked up behind her and replied, "Yes, Mother." She quickly turned around to face me, expecting to see her son. Instead, she was faced with the white mask of our city's notorious killer. Before she could make any noise, I threw the shards of glass I had in my hand into her face. She grabbed it in pain and stumbled back onto the glass, embedding each shard into her feet, only increasing her pain. She screamed and fell onto her back, still crawling away from me in fear. "What, Mother?" I asked playfully. "Are you afraid of your own son?" She didn't say anything, instead screamed as she raised her arm in defense. Growing tired of her annoying screaming, I grabbed her hair and jerked her towards me. She tried to pull away, but my grip was too strong for her to get away from me. I then took the 4 fingers of both my hands, placing one in the top of her mouth and the other on the bottom. You know, Mom, you always were too loud. With one strong jerk, I pulled her jaw out of place. Her tongue was dangling out of her mouth, and her bottom jaw flopped around. I had to do something about that tongue, as if it was starting to get on my nerves. So I grabbed her tongue and tried to rip it out, but it only tore it. Growing angry, I grabbed the tongue and pulled it again. This time it finally came out. Blood poured from my mother's mouth, like a waterfall, sending trails of it all over the floor. Tired of playing with her, I went into the garage and grabbed a container of gasoline. Re-entering the kitchen, I began to douse my mother in it, with her keeping her hands raised as if trying to keep it from falling on her, but to no avail. I took a matchbox from one of the drawers in the kitchen and struck one of the matches, crouching in front of her with the match in hand. He always said I was a pyromaniac, I said, lowering the match to the gasoline slowly. You were only half right. I then tossed the match onto her, and the flames spread all over her body, till she was entirely engulfed in flame. Her screams of agony fell on deaf ears, as I watched the orange flames grow higher. I continued to watch till the smell of burning flesh began to sicken me. So I left to my room, where I began to pack some of my things. After packing my bag fully, I went over to my window and opened it. Before climbing through it, I sat myself on the windowsill and looked back on my room. Remembering old memories of my life in this house, my eyes filled with tears till one managed to slip out and slide down my left cheek. I wipe away the tear and climb out the window, safely making it onto the ground. I watched as my old home slowly became inflamed till fire was all that could be seen. The sound of police sirens began to grow in the distance, signaling me that it was my time to leave. I turned my back to my old home for the last time as I headed into my new home. The night